What's up? What's up? What's up? It's your boy, the network. And today's topic is PPPoE, client side only. This is subsection 2.1b of the CCNP ROUTE exam code 300-101, version 2.0. This is a subsection of 2.1, configure and verify PPP. Let's take a look at the exam blueprint to see where we came from and where we're going. So this is the exam blueprint. It's implementing Cisco IP routing, exam code 300-101. Again, make sure you are signed up for the correct exam and you are studying for the correct version of the exam. Because remember, these exams retire and they change. Again, we are about to wrap up layer 2 technologies. No, actually, no. We're going to be doing frame relay after this. We just wrapped up authentication, PAP and CHAP, and we are going to do PPPoE client side only. Thank God, because the ISP side is it's just messy. It's mess. It's a hot mess. After that, we're going to do explain frame relay, section 2.2, frame relay operations. Now we're doing, again, PPPoE. So PPPoE is a feature or a technology that combines the features of PPP and Ethernet. If you remember what PPP was, if you don't, go to the last video and you'll know. Or if you ain't got time for all that, I'll explain to you now. PPP is point-to-point protocol. It's not what you do in the bathroom. It's point-to-point protocol. And it's basically an encapsulation method that's used on layer 2 on the WAN scale, right? But the thing with PPP is you can use it over serial links. You can use it over telephone lines. You can use it over cell phones even fiber optics, but you can't use it over Ethernet. And that's where PPPoE comes in. So it combines the great features of PPP, such as authentication, as well as Ethernet. Let's go ahead and look at the official definition. We got it from Cisco.com. PPPoE combines two widely accepted standards, Ethernet and PPP. So like I said, to provide an authenticated method that comes from the PPP side of assigning IP addresses to a client system or to client systems. Now, your client could be your Cisco router, but it could also be a PC. So your PC authenticating to the ISP, that would be using PPPoE frames. But we study in Cisco products, Cisco devices. We're going to be using the Cisco router as a PPPoE client. So PPPoE clients are typically, just like I said, are typically personal computers connected to an ISP over remote broadband connection, such as DSL or cable service. Cable service. This is kind of older technology because you had to dial into a router or dial into a modem to do all of this, right? Now, if you have, like, God forbid, Windows XP or Windows 7, you could go in the control panel and pull up, you have a dialer on there. So that way, and you could put in a username and password and authenticate to your ISP using PPPoE. I don't think Windows 10 got it or Windows 8 got it. It has a dialer, but I don't think you could. I don't know. I ain't really looking into all of that. But anyways, ISPs deploy PPPoE. That's going to be a tongue twister because it supports high-speed broadband access using their existing remote access infrastructure, and because it's easier for customers to use. So, when you're on it, like I said, you already have a PPPoE client on your personal computer. You just bring up the dialer, put in your username and password that was given to you or provided by the ISP, dial in, and then you can use the internet from there. That will be your gateway. Moving right along. So these are the components of PPPoE. You have the dialer, obviously is the number, like a dialer on a cell phone or a telephone. But it's a logical interface. When we're dealing with Cisco routers, we're creating what's called a dialer because that's what you was doing back then. You was dialing into the ISP. But on a router, it just creates kind of like how a loopback address or a loopback interface is just a virtual interface. The dialer is also a virtual interface on your router. I'll do a show IP interface briefing, and you can see that when we doing a lab. I'm going to be running a packet tracer for y'all to see too. So again, the dialer is a logical interface for configuring properties for modem connections. So I'll show y'all how to do all of that too on the on Packet Tracer. Another PPPoE component is a virtual template. This is a logical entity. This is another kind of like a loopback interface. It just shows up out of nowhere. It's not nothing physical. It's just, that's why it's called virtual. It's just a logical interface that pops up when you create the dialer. Or actually, you have to tie the dialer into the virtual template. That can be applied dynamically as needed. Virtual access interfaces, I just realized I put it twice on here, are virtual interfaces that are created, configured dynamically. For example, cloning a virtual template interface, used and then freed when no longer needed. So I was being redundant here with this definition at the bottom. Virtual access is an interface that's cloned from another interface, usually a virtual template or a dialer. So when you create the dialer, you're gonna have, I'll show you when we launch Packet Tracer. Okay, so this is a typical topology of a PPPoE infrastructure. You have your client and your server. Like I said, your client could be a PC dialing into the ISP. That's why they call it the dialer, the interface. But again, when you're studying Cisco devices, your Cisco router is going to be the client, and you dialing into the ISP. Now, when we're doing this, we got the client and the server, right? But we're not going to be now, just take a look at this again. The exam blueprint calls for client-side configuration only. You don't have to configure. You want to learn the ISP side, you take, I think, like CCNA service provider. I believe they got a whole certification for service provider or ISPs. We just worried about the client-side configuration only, right? So we just going to be configuring this guy right here. The PPPoE is composed of two main phases. You have the active discovery phase. You might as well say, so it's looking for a session ID. So this is kind of like DHCP. You're trying to get an IP address, but instead of an IP address, you're trying to get what's called a session ID. And that creates the session, the PPPoE session, once you receive it. Now, I'll break down for you what happens during the active discovery phase. You could do, I believe, show PPPoE session, and it'll show you all of that. But I'm doing this on Packet Tracer, so it might not even support it. We'll test it out to see though. So the active discovery phase, again, think of it like as DHCP, but for session IDs. You remember the acronym DORA, right? Looking for the discover, offer, I believe is request and acknowledge, right? That's the acronym for trying to get an IP address. Well, there's something like that when trying to obtain a session ID for a PPPoE client. You obtain that from the server. And then there's the PPP session phase. That's basically when the session is set up. You authenticated. You got your session ID, and everything is and now everything is just hunky dory. I've been living in Florida for too long. Everything's straight. So all the everything, all your PPP frames are going to be encapsulated in Ethernet from this point on. Okay, so this is the active discovery phase. The first one. So again, this is kind of like the DORA, the DORA steps in DHCP. You have the pad I, pad R, pad S, and pad T. First, it initiates, then it requests, then it confirms the session, and once it's all done, it terminates. And that terminates the active discovery phase. And then from there, you're going to be you are in the PPP session phase when you're going to start sending PPPoE frames across the network. You want to write this down, freeze frame it, whatever you want to do. But this is kind of like DHCP, but for a session ID. If you look up the RFC, I don't remember the RFC number, but this is the actual frame format for PPPoE frames. But I wanted it in color. When these RFC documents, they did it in like typewriter, and it's just plain text. So I just went and looked for a graphics version of it. This is the PPPoE Frame. So it's these guys right here. This just kind of breaks down the payload. This is all it's doing right here. So this is the version of it. It's always going to be one. There's only one version. There's only one type. This is where the pad O, pad I, pad R, pad S, pad T goes in. That tells you what part of the active discovery session it is in. And then the session ID, which is announced in a pads frame, which is this guy right here. Remember, here's pads right here. PPPoE active discovery session confirmation. The pad R is confirmed and the session ID is given out with it. So this is confirmed, and then now you have the session ID. That number is placed in here. Or that tells you, the session ID is placed in here. But this tells you what part of this active discovery session it's in when it's going back and forth. So it's just like DHCP. And then this is the length of the header, and this is which protocol it's in. IPCP, LCP, PAP, and CHAP. Remember, PAP is clear text passwords. CHAP is passwords that are hashed, not encrypted, but hashed. And they use that to authenticate. Now we're going to bring up Packet Tracer and configure a router as a PPPoE client. Thank God it's Friday. Actually, it's Monday, but thank God we ain't got to do the service provider side, because this is a hot mess. I'll tell y'all right now. I had a little kind of difficulties understanding this, even though it's kind of easy to set up the client. You know, it was just, I had a difficult time kind of grasping this topic. All right, so again, part 1 says to configure the ISP router, but we're not going to do that, right? In part 1, you configure the ISP router with PPPoE parameters. There are 4 connections with client 1 router. This is the topology. I forgot where I got this from. If you are watching this and this is your network, you know, I shout you out. I'll put a link in the description to your website, whatever you want. But I remember I found this on the internet. I basically stripped the configurations for the client side on this guy right here, and it just created an activity for it. But anyways, this is the client. Hold on, let me go ahead and fix that. What did I just do? Let's reset this bad boy. So this guy's the client, and then this is the server that we're gonna configure. Client, the server. We're not gonna configure. I'm sorry. This is the client. This is the server. We're not gonna be configuring the server, which is the ISP in this case. We're gonna be configuring the client. So let's go ahead and bring this bad boy up. Let's go ahead and zoom in. This is a, I believe, 2911 router. I like looking at these guys. That way it kind of helps familiarize it. I wish GNS3 kind of did that, but it don't. It's a 2900 series router. All right, so we got the router up right here. Again, this is the client side that we are configuring. That's all the CCNP router exam calls for. Now, there's different ways to set up. Some people might do it differently. I'm going to be encapsulating PPPoE on the physical interface first, and then we're going to work on the virtual interfaces. So let's go ahead and move on to page 2. Since we're not configuring the ISP router, we're going to configure the client side, which is client 1. This guy right here. Now, again, let's discuss the topology as well. We have these clients right here, and this is the client router that we are going to be configuring. They will be able to access the internet once this guy is set up as a client with the ISP. Now, again, you can do that with the PCs as well. I don't know if Packet Tracer does that, but we are doing it with the routers. So let's go ahead. Enable mode, configure terminal, interface, gigabit, interface 00. And we're gonna change. We have to enable PPPoE on the interface. Right. This is kind of like, you know how if you go back to the video prior to this, the then you do encapsulation PPP, right? Well, for PPPoE, it's just PPPoE enabled. Don't get too hung up on memorizing this stuff. Just know the concepts behind it. I used to make that mistake back when I was first studying for this stuff, trying to memorize. It's a billion commands out there. You're not going to remember all of that. You just have to know the basic concepts of it. And once you do that, then you'll be able to, you could just question mark through the menus all day, and then you'll be able to learn it. But if you're trying to memorize it, you won't learn this stuff. So notice how once we enabled PPPoE, we created that virtual access interface. So now it's virtual access 1, change to up, and it is up. Let's go ahead and take a look at our interfaces to see what happened. Do show IP interface brief. And notice how this guy is still, he's up. I want to shut him down so that we can see what's going on once we do some debugging. But he created a virtual access 1, unassigned, but it's up, right? Will we be able to ping the IP? I doubt it. The IP address, I already know it by now. It's 10.1.1.1. Let's try, just for the heck of it. Exit. Let's do Control Z. Shout out to Dewan for showing me that little trick. Ping 10.1.10.1. Sending. It's not going to go through because we haven't really configured it. Anyways, we 10% complete right now. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. What we have to do is PPPoE, and let's see what our steps here. We got to go in configuration mode for that interface. Configure terminal interface GI00 PPPoE, right? We could enable it. If we do a dash, we got PPPoE Client. So now we are declaring him a PPPoE client, and then we have to put the dialer pool number. Now this is a number that you're going to have to, you already see the steps right here. These are all the steps right here. That number has to match with the dialer pool, not the interface dialer. That's the other virtual interface. You have to make sure it matches with the dialer pool. So the pool number needs to the dialer pool number needs to match with the dialer pool. That's what has to be mapped. Dial pool number 1. You can put any number, but make sure that matches. Let's go ahead and exit. We are now 20% complete, right? Now we need to associate the gigabit 00 interface with a dialer interface. That's what we're doing now, right? Just like I said, they use the username client_1 and password Cisco1 configured in part 1. We didn't do part 1 because that was the ISP side. Let's go ahead and move on to do that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the interfaces real quick. So in the IP interface brief, that's what we got so far, right? Let's go ahead and interface dialer 1. What happens? Do show IP interface brief. Now notice we have a dialer 1, right? Unassigned. They both up. Can we ping now? I'll tell y'all right now we can't because we haven't authenticated yet. Let's go ahead and debug our PPP packets. Debug PPP authentication. Actually, we got to do debug PPP authentication, right? Notice PPP authentication debugging is on. So now let's go ahead and change the size of our MTU. That's what I forgot to explain to y'all. Let's go ahead and go back. This guy right here, this PPPoE frame, the header is actually 8 bytes. So remember, if you remember in the MTU videos, the MTU size is 1500 bytes. So to make up for that, for this guy to fit, we need to lower our MTU size. Now you could do this in different ways. That's just how I did it for this setup. So we don't have to modify the MTU size. Let's go ahead and do that. MTU 1492. So 1492 plus the 8 byte header. This PPPoE header is going to be tacked on to the 1492, which will give us the 1500. So we set that guy up. IP address negotiated. Let's see what our options are on this guy. We could set up an IP address or negotiate. We're going to do a negotiate because that's going to be kind of like, this is kind of like DHCP, but this is kind of like DHCP, but we're negotiating with the ISP. So IP address negotiated. All right, so now we're going to encapsulate our PPP frames. Dialer pool, this is the number that got to match with your dial pool number that's on the physical interface. Dial pool 1. And notice virtual access 2, that's what was cloned, just like we mentioned before. This guy right here. Virtual access, an interface that is cloned from another interface, usually a virtual template or dialer, and that's this guy right here. Let's take a look at our syslog messages. They keep coming. It keeps flapping right now because we haven't even authenticated. Interface virtual access 2 went up, line protocol up, virtual interface bound, unbound from profile. So it keeps unbinding right now. Know why? Because we haven't authenticated yet. Let's take a look at our interfaces real quick again. Show IP interface brief before the message comes up again. So we got virtual access 1 is up, up. Virtual access 2 is down, down. Why? We haven't authenticated yet. So it's bound. You'll see it's going to unbind. Let's wait and see. Notice our dialer 1 is IPCP is the method. Boom, changed it down. Virtual access 2. So let's go ahead and authenticate and do that. PPP chap hostname client underscore 1 PPP chap hostname Cisco 1. Now this is a username and password that is on the ISP server. If we put the wrong password or username password, obviously we won't authenticate. We still won't be able to bind our virtual interface to the dialer. Boom. Let's see what happens. Well, our syslog messages look like they stopped. We are at 100% complete. Let's go ahead and see if we can ping our ISP. Now, I put this in here. It changed it down. Let's see what happened here. Can we ping? Do ping 10 1 10 1. Pinging. Haven't done it yet. Let's go ahead and set up a default route pointing to the dialer interface because we're not able to ping the ISP right now, right? Now, this is a debugging, another debugging command you want to put in. Debug PPPoE events, but it's not supported in Packet Tracer. I put that in here. So let's go ahead and IP route 000. This is also called a 0 route. Dialer 1. Can we ping the gateway now? We just bound the profile 1. It may go down. It may or may not. Let's see. Do ping 10 1 10 1. It went down again. Let's see what's going on here. Let's see. We enable PPPoE. We created our interface dialer. Let's take a look at our interfaces here. Do show IP interface brief. It says we're at 100%, but something is down. Something's not authenticated, right? Let's see what's down. Virtual access 2 is down, right? let's make sure we created the correct password. Still authenticating. It's down. Can we ping him? Still not been able to ping. We created a static route, didn't we? All right, our interfaces look good. We don't want to have an IP address on the physical interface. Let's go ahead and I believe the password I ain't put the username correct. PPP chap. Go back to interface dialer 1 PPP chap hostname client. We gotta make sure this is in caps. Client 1 PPP chap hostname or password Cisco 1. And there we go. We put the wrong username password there. See that? Close. Let's go ahead and see if we can ping that guy now. 10, 1, 10, 1. And there we go. Success rate. You put the wrong username. I believe I put the username incorrectly. So it looks like we good to go here. Let's go ahead and see if we got any more. And that guy. Active, again, that's the active discovery phrase when it's trying to get a session ID. Pad I, Pad R, Pad S, Pad T. This is the frame. In the RFC document, I'll put a link in the description below. And that is the configuration command that we just used right now. There's a different username and password though. Remember, the ones that got to match is the dialer pool number, the dialer pool on the interface dialer, as well as on the physical interface. That's the number that got to match. This guy here and this guy right here. If you like this video, go ahead and comment, like, subscribe to the network.